Today on Doomed, QAnon is coming to Qongress. That is really, not even almost, that is definitely going to happen based on a recent primary, which we'll be discussing on this show. We'll also be talking about how the rise of Q in Washington came to be, and how the conspiracy theory isn't going anywhere. Folks, to support this show, patreon.com/MattBinder. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/MattBinder. And without any further ado, my guest on this episode. He is the president of Media Matters for America, Angelo Carusone. Thank you so much for joining me today, Angelo.
Thanks for having me.
Let me just pull us up on the feed, and we are on camera now. So,
all right.
I really want to just upfront say that this show, and there's a lot of other great shows that have been covering QAnon, QAnon Anonymous, TrueAnon. There's a number of really great shows that have been focusing on Q. And these shows, though, including this one, we focus on the conspiracy theory itself, and that's really, and all the separate theories that come out of it, and just all the insanity you find online with QAnon. But Media Matters decided to take hold of the fallout from the growth of the QAnon conspiracy into really the broader everyday life of everyone. And you guys have been doing such great work on how QAnon is basically... How many people who believe in QAnon are running for Congress right now?
There were 75 that we tracked, and our researcher Alex Kaplan does a lot of this, and that we tracked running for Congress.
And that's at the federal level.
At the federal level. And at least 20 of them are going to be on the ballot in November. We're talking a lot about Marjorie Greene because of the likelihood that she's going to win, but there are still 20 and we don't just mean people that casually dabbled in it, right? We're talking about actual QAnon adherents. There's a pretty high standard for when we put somebody in that category. 75 in the congressional, the national level.
So you just mentioned this. So how does Media Matters decide to label a candidate as a QAnon candidate?
Yeah, I think that one of the things so we try to keep it pretty consistent. And one of the things and one of the standards that our researcher who does a lot of the tracking, Alex Kaplan, does is there's a few indicators. One is that they have to have promoted QAnon content or hashtags or elements of the conspiracy theory, not just once, right? But at least a couple times. It has to have appeared to be explicitly tied to Q, which is not always an easy thing to do, right? Because sometimes they're more cryptic about it. It has to be clear that it was deliberate, right? That you're not holding them accountable for not swatting down some commenter, but it actually came from one of their official channels. It has to align with things so that's the first criteria. The second is that it has to sort of broadly fit in with the rest of the things that they're saying in all their other communications. That doesn't mean that that their press releases have to all be Q hashtags, but if it feels wildly out of step and they retweeted a QAnon count once, it may not be the case that they're actually Q adherents. They may have just messed up. Right. And then the third criteria is repetition, which is a pretty clear, important factor there. It's have they done this thing tied to QAnon? Does it broadly align with the rest of the narrative that they're telling about their campaign, that their campaign is presenting? And then the third piece is there enough examples of this to show some kind of demonstrated pattern so that you can see and infer intentionality and alignment really clearly? And then that's just the bare minimum. And then you have people that straight up evangelize it. I mean, Marjorie Taylor Greene at one point was telling people if they weren't sure about QAnon, to DM her and she would help them understand what it was all about. Obviously that's a no-brainer.
Right.
But those three criteria really do need to be met before somebody would get added to that list.
Now, I got to ask you, because for me, this would be a surefire thing. None of the other criteria would matter. Hashtag where we go one, we go all in the bio. To me, that's it. You don't need anything else.
Right. That's it. It's pretty obvious, right? I mean,
right.
That is And that's the other thing. I mean, there may be some exceptions where we say, well, hey, this guy may not have, or maybe scrubbed their tweets, but they still have it in their bio, where we'll kind of let it go through. But a lot of it is, and that's the thing. If you're a Q person, you're doing it for a reason, not just because you believe in it, although that's a part of it. But if you're running for office, you're actually doing it because you see some political or organizing advantage to it. So a lot of times there's some repetition in there, and I think that's where it starts to get a little risky for all of us.
Right. Now, let's start with Marjorie Greene, because no matter what happens in November, I don't know how many QAnon believers are going to Congress, but it seems like, I don't want to say 100% because who knows, but it seems like 99% sure that if one of them gets in, it's going to be her.
Yep, that's exactly right. And so I think, and that's why it's really concerning, because it means a couple things. One, that there's an afterlife for Q if Donald Trump loses, right? Because it's one of the things that makes this so deeply a pro-Trump conspiracy, at least for now, is that it really is a pro-Trump conspiracy theory. The entire thing is centered around the idea that they're defending Trump. What her presence does is it gives another sort of connection or organ of power that they can rally around, right? A new champion to be fighting the deep state. So it at least gives some insurance that they won't go away. Two, I actually think it adds a lot of gasoline to the fire, because imagine videos where an old corridor that used to be in Congress, right, is no longer in service. I mean, her being able to post pictures and saying, I wonder if that's the tunnel where they bring, right? You could think about the endless amounts of fodder that she can provide.
Well, she's literally going to be working side by side with people that she believes to be satanic pedophiles.
Yes. Right. Yes. Like that's a huge, and that's where it means that there's an endless stream of fodder and fuel for for this sort of QAnon community. And that portends it's not just bad because they're going to get bigger and have this energy behind them, but it also means that her footprint and her presence is only going to grow as well, because she's going to become much more of a national figure than just another local congressperson would, because of what she's going to be able to represent is she's going to speak to a pretty baked-in constituency.
Right. So let's actually step back for 1 second, because I realize maybe someone who's tuning into the show for the first time isn't quite sure what QAnon even is. So let's just, I guess, there is a general basic summary for QAnon, but obviously because of the nature of how it is, there's something new someone could add for every description. So how would you explain QAnon to someone who has never heard it before?
I have been doing this for the last couple of months. I feel like I have a cheat code because I've had to explain this to so many people that are not remotely connected to the Q world or even online. And so the way I describe it in the simplest, most concise terms is that it is a community centered around an individual who claims to be a member of the deep state, who has Q level security clearance. And what he does, or this person does, is drop these clues that members of the community try to decipher. And the reason why this person is doing it is because they are in cahoots with, or trying to expose, or trying to help Donald Trump, who is fighting back against in a coordinated effort by the deep state, which is basically civil servants, the government, the media, and Democrats, because Trump is trying to break up their child sex trafficking ring. And the reason why they're running this is because they are either sort of like sadist sex perverts, but actually it's mostly because they're either Satanists or interdimensional demons who are feeding off of the children's psychic energy in order to initiate their large global agenda. And Trump is one of the only people that knows this and is willing to fight it, and that's why everybody has to rally behind Q so that they can defend Trump.
I gotta say, that is the most concise explanation I've heard, because when I tell people about it, I honestly drop the Q explanation now, because Q is really unnecessary.
It's true. It's gone beyond Q.
He or she or they haven't even posted in a couple of weeks now, and you think they'd be partying it up with Marjorie Greene winning and the Biden picking a VP. So much fodder for him or her or they, and just radio silence. But that's QAnon hasn't been hit at all. It keeps on rolling.
That's right. I mean, part of what kept, and I guess, in a way it shows how purposeful it was, because one of the things that Q did with those Q drops was I'm an organizer by background, and so when you're organizing, the people you're trying to pull in, they need things to do in order to stay engaged with the cause or the effort or the fight. And what Q provided was something common for them to organize around. And it was like, let's try to figure out what this latest set of clues means. Let's decipher this Q drop. Let's really, comb through this flight manifest to see if somebody connected to Hillary Clinton was on there, so that they could, then see what the code really was. And in a way, you needed that because you wanted to keep the cause going. But you don't. At this point, you don't need it anymore. You have TikTok, right? You can spin up a new Wayfair conspiracy. You can glom onto another effort about child sex trafficking. At that point, Trump wasn't amplifying QAnon as much as he is now. So there's a lot of other things that are helping fuel it, and in a way, Q isn't really needed.
Now, I got to ask you, because you brought it up. Now, for people who aren't familiar, Angelo, I don't know if it was your first, but one of your biggest organizing efforts was, years ago. I remember you doing this. Stop Glenn Beck. Stop Beck. Yeah. Get him off Vox. Now,
how I got into all this.
It didn't even occur to me until just now when I was talking with you, but I got to ask, because if anyone would know, it's you. Has Glenn Beck promoted QAnon in any way?
Not in an explicit way yet. I mean, there's been, they reference it, they're careful about it, but they... not explicitly, but in a way, I mean, I would just point out though that he was 10 years ago he was talking about dark forces, and it wasn't really clear, and and I'll sort of stop there. But one of the most interesting things about that one piece of symmetry is that there was a point in time where Beck argued, this was a decade ago, on Fox News, that Obama might have demon connections to him, and his evidence was flies. Remember all those viral videos of like Obama swatting? And Beck's contention was, remember, he was at that point he was a Scousonite, which is a sort of a sect of Mormonism that had been sort of broken off because of its extremism, and it believes in a lot of conspiracies. And Beck believed that Obama might have been tied to the Antichrist or demons because of the flies, and that he was there, and that was his evidence, was these flies. And so, in a way, it's not like this is the first time a large conservative audience, right, has been told that these bad figures could maybe not actually even be humans, but in some ways, extra otherworldly. Mm-hmm. But that's it. That's the symmetry. It's there. That's where it begins and ends. I think Q is a little too unreliable even for Glenn Beck right now.
Hey, hell, but Beck could send them all a chalkboard. It could help them suss this stuff out,
I know.
Really, put it in some order there. So let's get back to Marjorie, because, we should talk about her a little more, being that she's the one most likely to be around for a while. Jeez, it's like, I saw someone tweet this out, but they tweeted, I think might have been even Dave Weigel or someone like that. The Thanos meme of everything's always balanced. How we just got rid of like Steve King, and then Marjorie Greene comes in. There's always got to be some sort of extremist. That's just how it's always got to be, apparently. Now she what makes her specifically a QAnon believer? It's for people who aren't familiar, because she's openly a Q person, but for people who don't know,
full on Q. Yeah, I even say, when I try to think about the distinction too between adherents to it and believers, there's another. If you think about it as rings, there's a center ring of QAnon, of members of the QAnon community that are not just like believers and hardcore adherents, but they are evangelizers for it. That they believe a big part of their job is not just to help sort of suss out the ideas behind the conspiracy, but to really bring others into the fold, to actually grow the belief system, to uncover this. And so what, to me, what really separates out from some of the other QAnon candidates has actually been not just the explicit way in which she has embraced the conspiracy theory and all things Q, and that, she's really gone like very explicit on like this thing is a Satan operation that we need to break up. Like others kind of dance around it. But it's actually that she has repeatedly evangelized it and offered to build, to help people understand, one, what it is all about. And then two, Marjorie Taylor Greene, I think in a weird way, is one of the few people in Q that is still connected to Q themselves. I mean, she has repeatedly referred to Q as a national hero, and really like fundamentally believes that entity, whoever that person claim, whatever they claim to be, is doing amazing work. Like they believe, like she believes in Q. She doesn't just believe in the conspiracy. Like she really believes in this person that's sitting there doing this. And I just want to point out, and then I'll put a bow on it, is that there is a thing called Q clearance, but it is not like some super high, like special. It is actually Department of Energy security clearance, and it's for people that work with like nuclear material. It's it's like from a lot of the Q stuff is from like spy movies, right? Like that's the part about this that's so fantastic, is that she believes that there's somebody at the Department of Energy working with Donald Trump to to do this, and she really is connected to the entity as much as the theory, and I think that's an important thing about her compared to others.
Right. Yeah, there's that video of her that was going around a couple of days ago where she openly says, I know nothing about Q, no idea who he is, but I do know he's a patriot.
That's right.
That's all, They love that word, first of all. That's like, makes them so happy to know someone who they call a patriot. But yeah, I mean, it's stunning. And now, it just occurred to me too, 75 main like QAnon folks running for Congress. We could literally do like an episode a day on them until the election, and literally just like have a week to take off for a break right before the election. I mean, it's stunning just how many people are running who believe in this. So if Marjorie's a sure thing, we got her in there.
Yep.
Who are the next couple of QAnon candidates who have a good shot of?
Ooh.
Yeah.
It's tough. I mean, look, Lauren Boebert, I think, is sort of in that vein. I think that Boebert is probably one of the softer Q people, but that's just because she's more politically savvy, right? And Lauren Boebert is one of the young guns. I mean, it was actually on Kevin McCarthy's list of like new incoming Congress people. I think that's an example of somebody that's sort of like right there, that's likely to kind of break through. Is she the one with her whole thing was she went viral because her restaurant refused to do the COVID health stuff and shut down when that's right. Yeah, in Colorado. And I would point out that her connections are she's done podcasts just like this one, but with actual there's a whole universe of shows of QAnon advocates that sort of host their latest discussions about the conspiracy because they're believers and they're trying to evangelize it. She was a participant in a bunch of these like QAnon podcasts and QAnon streaming shows at the time. She's been on a few of them. I think if I was to put my money on one, it'd probably be Lauren, and she's in Colorado. And in a way, there's a lot of it's a balance between her, and I think the coverage is kind of fascinating, and I think it shows. While it's interesting and it's somewhat cathartic and good that there's a lot of coverage around QAnon right now, because there's only been a very small number of people that have been really sounding the alarm about it, thankfully. I don't understand why more attention isn't also being given to Boebert, right? Because she believes in all the same things that Marjorie Taylor Greene does and is now like fully embraced by the leadership of the Republicans. And I think it starts to make you wonder a little bit, why is it the case that Republicans seemingly were distancing themselves more from Greene than Boebert? And she said a lot more other explicitly racist things. And I feel like that was really what they're distancing themselves from, even though I think the media narrative is that they're sort of trying to break away from Q. I think it's less about the theory and more about some of the other stuff. But, I think she's the next best one, and she's going to be in a much more senior position. She's going to get much better committee assignments than Greene would, right? Boebert could be on the Intelligence Committee, whereas I don't think they would let Greene go on there. That's the stuff that I think, that's where it matters, right?
Right.
So I would put her right in the next, yeah.
I think you hit it, though, really good in the beginning in terms of the difference between the two of them. And I've noticed this, too, just watching videos of theirs and how they present themselves. Lauren really does... Lauren's her name, right? Lauren Boebert?
Yeah,
right?
Lauren,
She really does seem to be pandering. She thinks... I don't know if she believes full-heartedly in Q like Marjorie does, or if she even believes in it at all.
I think that's right. Yeah, I think that's right.
I think she knows there's an opening there. There's a section of Trump supporters who believe in this, and she's gonna throw them some red meat. Whereas
That's right.
Marjorie, though, they're both, they both are extremists and are scary. But Marjorie, though, I think if you were to try to if you were to sit both of them down and talk with them, you could probably, you'll probably get out of Lauren and like, yeah, this stuff is kind of out there, some of this stuff. Marjorie, though, she's gonna argue with you on why it's real because she really believes it. I mean,
No,
she
I
is
think
in
you're
there.
right. I think you're totally right. I think that's important too. In a way, the Q people may not have much an effect for them, because they're so baked into this that they sort of understand, and this is the part that I find so amazing, that there's so much pressure from the deep state, right? That like people like Bert have to soften their Q support. Like they will rationalize anything. And so they are actually in a way the perfect audience to pander to, because you don't have to give them very much in order for them to like fully embrace you as like a member of their community and give you all the rewards that go along with that, with his organizing energy. In a way, I can't tell which is worse, right? The true believer that is immovable and will do all kinds of scary things, or the person that knows better but does it anyway for short-term gain, but actually empowers all these other really dangerous people. And I want to emphasize that, if this was like a harmless conspiracy theory, it would be like fun to talk about and it would be like different, but I actually wouldn't be as like serious in a sense. I would really make sure that I conveyed that it's like, it's lighthearted, it's ridiculous, like we should laugh at them, but like ultimately it's not that bad. Inherent within Q is violence, is ends justify the means, because the idea is that you have to be prepared to take matters into your own hands to save these children, and that's what you have to be ready to do. Like that's what a lot of the take the oath stuff was about over the summer, and and we've seen violent actions. A blocking of the Hoover Dam once. We've had moments where people that were ready to, where vans were loaded up with ammunitions, that law enforcement managed to stop it before it happened. Very similar to a Glenn Beck intersection when that guy was going to shoot up the Tides Foundation, which was a target for Glenn Beck. There's a lot of parallels there, but that's what makes the Q thing really scary. So when people like Bert kind of give them a little bit of fuel, even though I'm with you, I think she actually knows better. I feel like that's in a way almost, it's irresponsible in a way that I don't know if Marjorie Taylor Greene is capable of being as irresponsible, just because I think she truly believes what she's saying.
Right. And I was on the Majority Report filling in with the rest of the MR crew for Sam Cedar today, and this caller called in asking us about QAnon, and I brought up because you mentioned like laughing at it if it wasn't so serious, so scary. But I've been saying this for a while now. There is a generation of people who are lost to this QAnon conspiracy. Yeah. They're lost. There's no saving them. I even to really like hone in on how lost they are. I usually bring up how there are groups run by like former white supremacists who do work to help brainwash young people who get fall down a YouTube rabbit hole and believe in white supremacy to save them from it. And those groups work, and you can save some of those people from white supremacy. The QAnon thing, those people are gone. You can't even do that for them. It's a cult. It is beyond saving a lot of those people. But the caller continued and asked, so how do you stop someone who's lightly, like he has friends on Facebook looking into this? And I think for someone who's lightly, because there are a lot of people ever since the pandemic starting to get into Q, I think a way to do that is that at that point, it's all about the socialization aspect. They don't really know everything about Q. So if you can make this socially unacceptable by discussing just how ridiculous this is and openly really mocking it and laughing at it, I do think you will save a lot of those people who are about to fall in. Because once they're in, I don't think there's any coming out of this one. I mean, this one is, you are gone if you're in here. I
agree. And I would say that there's one piece of it, and they grow in very intentional and deliberate ways. And one of the entry points is, and I think part of, to your point, like sort of inoculating the further spread of this is, it does start with, it can't be binary in that you have to at least acknowledge, I found, that there are people, especially like I've gone to, like there's been some proliferation in like parenting communities on Facebook and some of the mommy blogs, the larger parent support groups where they start to talk about the problem of child sex trafficking and the exploitation of children. and which is like a thing that people can engage with, especially with social media, right? Like, I mean, for gosh sake, Snapchat up until a couple weeks ago didn't have any real strong countermeasures for how they were going to deal with child pornography, and only recently announced it, right? And so if you're a normal, rational person, to your point, you're home, you're during this moment, somebody starts to talk about this problem or this scourge of child exploitation, child sex trafficking, and gosh, one of the entry points to your point about the brainwashing is that they actually bring you in with something that I think we can all universally recognize as bad, and also something we should do something about. And I found that there's an enormous amount of resistance the second that we start, or anyone starts, in the perspective of that's not a threat, that's not really that big of a thing, that's not really a problem. They immediately go deeper down the rabbit hole because it validates that there's something there that they need to dig into. What I've found is that, one, starting there and then steering them toward more deliberate, intentional, like anti-trafficking work and anti-trafficking resources, and that sort of like genuine anti-trafficking research, it doesn't cleave off everybody, but there's a large universe of people that are becoming exposed to how bad that is and want to do something about it or are interested. And there is a universe of people and organizations that are doing anti-trafficking work that they can engage with. But that feels to me like one of the most difficult gateways to navigate, is that a lot of the initial hooks we see has been that. And I will just add, it's really different from 3 years ago when Q was still sort of going around as like the storm. They weren't bringing people in they weren't leading with child sex trafficking. They were leading with like Obama, Clinton, conspiracy, like
the deep state's trying to take down Trump. Right.
That's right. It was and so the audience that you could pull in was really different, right? You probably lost those people before they became believers in Q and the Storm, because they started from a perspective of Hillary Clinton is literally capable of putting rocket launchers over her shoulder and killing, shooting down planes, and has a body count. Like, they believed that before they became members of the Q community.
Right.
And that, I think, is one of the more insidious shifts in the last year, has been a very intentional leading with child sex trafficking more than they lead with the deep state politics stuff.
Right. So, let's talk about really quickly about how we got here to the point where we're going to have QAnon believers in Congress.
Yep.
So the number one driver seems to be one specific individual who really doesn't have a problem sharing QAnon accounts. I mean, he might not be sharing explicitly QAnon beliefs, but it legitimizes the movement when you're retweeting people who have the QAnon bios and they are tweeting about QAnon 24/7. And of course, I'm talking about the guy at the very center of all this, President Donald Trump.
Yep. I mean, we tracked it. He's tweeted about QAnon more than 200 times since 2017. The overwhelming majority of those instances, so about 120 or so, came since the middle of March, which is interesting because that also happens to overlap with when all the COVID stuff started to go into place and people started to retreat, right? So your observation before really lines up with a lot of the other factors here, which is that Trump started to radically amplify and increase his amplification of QAnon accounts and QAnon advocates. We saw a lot of growth there, and it's deliberate because there's a lot of cross-pollination, right? He understands that if you give it a little bit of attention, it will spread and grow. I think the existence of the virus and some of the dabbling that he did early on, one of the narratives lined up with QAnon, right, which was that this is a deep state plot in order to undermine Donald Trump, and so they were already the first people to believe it. And one of the things that happened really quickly, and then I think it sort of shows how these things can grow and then go back to Q, is that when all those reopen events started taking place in early April, one of the things that really gave us a red flag was that we found that a lot of a lot of those reopener groups that were opening up, that were starting to try to fight back against the stay-at-home orders, that they weren't just organic reopen groups, and they weren't just started by random people. A lot of times they were started by already existing QAnon communities in that area and QAnon advocates who sort of understood how to organize, and they were cross-pollinating with anti-vaxxers, and they were bringing in new people about the reopen thing. So when you're there and somebody is telling you, about this deep state plot, they're starting to weave in some of the anti-vax content, both of those audiences grew quite a bit, but they were at the center of much of the reopen, similar to the way that we saw how the Tea Party emerged from the 9/12 project. That wasn't the first time it started. It started as a 9/12 project, and then over the next 6 months, because they started having these chapter meetings, started to form these tax day tea protests, and that's when it became the Tea Party. It was a very similar moment, which is that they finally got together. They cross-pollinated, they grew, and at the same time, Trump is amplifying them. So that's the most recent surge. Obviously, tech companies are responsible too, but Trump, by far and away, these last couple months and all these factors really, really juiced it.
Right, right. And I'm so glad you brought up the mommy bloggers again, because you reminded me of what I wanted to say. You brought up the Save the Children thing, and, they talk about child trafficking legitimately, and the QAnon gets brought up into it. But what I've been noticing is that early on, I actually wrote an article, I think it was about 2 years ago now, about how, QAnon is the rare online conspiracy that seems to be mostly driven by people in the baby boomer generation. They skewed older, and it's not something you usually see with online conspiracies. Yes, older people are more susceptible to fake news online because they didn't grow up with the idea that anyone can literally say whatever they want on a blog, and that doesn't mean they're a legit news source. But usually you don't see a movement grow out of that like you did with QAnon. But I've been noticing ever since the pandemic that because of all these different things going on, you are getting a more diversified demographic with QAnon. It's still mostly baby boomers at this point, but the demographic is diversifying. If you go on Instagram, you will come across mommy bloggers who talk about parenting, arts and crafts, and all of a sudden you'll get some Q anti-vaxxer stuff. And it's like, whoa, wait a minute. First of all, where did this come from in that feed? And then second of all, if you do know about Q and the conspiracy world, all of a sudden anti-vaccinations are thrown into QAnon. Well, yeah, that's what's going on here. And like we were talking about just earlier, I think we even mentioned it before the show even started. Early on, I was saying this is going to be like an incubator from just seeing how Pizzagate was waning down, and then QAnon came out, and then boom, Pizzagate got a second boom, a second life. It's wrapped up in QAnon now. All these conspiracy theories that were never able to flourish and live on their own are now basically guaranteed a never-ending life for as long as QAnon lives on, because they are now intertwined with it. Even like major conspiracy theories like the anti-vaxxers, who quite frankly probably don't need QAnon, are finding a new audience with QAnon. And it's getting to the point where it's like, what is going on here, and how, like, what's next? Like, I've honestly never seen a conspiracy theory of this nature get to the point where it's gone, and we're not even at the end of it.
No, we're not. We're really not.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, please. No, sorry.
In fact, we're going to get to this now, because this was going to be our next question. What happens to QAnon? What do you think happens to QAnon if November comes and Donald Trump loses the presidency?
It only makes them stronger. Yeah. Because the entire theory behind QAnon is that all of these forces are conspiring to stop him. And he's doing his best, right? He's fighting as hard as he can. But, he said this comment I guess 2 weeks ago at one of his speeches to one of the factories that he was at. And he said something like, well, maybe you won't see me. Maybe I won't be able to be back, and you won't be able. Pretty soon I won't be around. You won't be able to see me. And the Q community blew up over that, because they thought that was sort of a plea for help, that Trump was saying that the forces were bearing down on him too greatly. And I looked at that moment and how they responded as an indicator for what the hell does this mean if he loses, and then even if he doesn't contest it, which I think he'll throw enough fuel on the fire, just like today when he's dabbling in claiming Kamala Harris can't be the vice president for legal reasons. Even if he doesn't go full, hey, it was a rigged election, he can still amplify a lot of the nonsense around it. And what Q will basically see, what the Q audience will see, is the most visual, vivid validation of every single thing that they've been warning about. They will see the election as that it was stolen, that it was taken by these demons, and that not only is it not legitimate, but I worry about a strain of them that have been preparing for this, which is that they need to maybe take matters into their own hands. But a lot of them are going to grow, and a lot of disaffected conservatives and Trump people in the larger MAGA universe who are not fully, QAnon yet are going to say, you know what, they had a point. These people are evil, and there was some nefarious stuff going on. And I don't know if I can go all the way in on demons, but I'm with you on the rest of it. And so I'll get to the demons eventually, and that's it. And that's just the truth. And that's where it goes. It's, in a way, it's bad. Trump losing is better for almost absolutely everything, except for all of the people that have to deal with members of their family that are QAnon advocates, because they're going to be way worse.
Right. I mean, the amazing thing is, and this is with conspiracy theories in general. A lot of these conspiracy theories actually hit on real issues of things that are actually happening. They just completely miss the mark and take out their anger and frustration on the wrong targets. I mean, Sam Cedar years ago would say this about Alex Jones, where, there are a group of people who pretty much run the government and frankly the world, and they are the very rich and powerful. You don't need Alex Jones making up lizard people living on a mountain who are actually pulling all the strings to actually know that there are very powerful people who are in control of what's going on. Like, you don't need to make up this fake satanic child trafficking ring to know that there is sex trafficking going on around the world and we should be paying attention to it. You don't need all these different various conspiracies they're throwing in there. It's just frankly crazy. And and I guess this might be the best way to bring this discussion for the final topic. So Trump's gone, the QAnon people get more powerful. Based on how Republicans have been acting with QAnon now, what do you think? Because how is the party and people in the party who aren't Trump, how have they been treating QAnon? I mean, I know I've seen maybe one of them come out and say this whole QAnon thing is ridiculous. None of these conspiracy theories are real. I mean, frankly, if you look at QAnon's predictions, not one of them have come to fruition. They've all been, we're still waiting. When are these mass arrests? Where are these executions?
I thought, I've been thinking about that, and there's some actions we've seen already from Republican leaders, right? They kind of condemned Marjorie Greene today, and then Trump came out and embraced her, and so all the Republican leadership pretty quickly walked that back. So I thought that was one indicator. But then I look at the people that do this for a living, right? That have to talk to this audience. So people like Sean Hannity, right? And I really think that he's a good example or a good bellwether here into how the rest of the Republican establishment will treat this, because he's a business guy, right? He's got an audience. He knows where the line is. And there's an interesting thing about this, which is that I look at past and see if it's relevant here. So one is, in August of 2016, Sean Hannity condemned much of the right-wing online conspiracy community for promoting the idea that Hillary Clinton had something to do with the murder of Seth Rich, right?
Right.
In May of 2017, so he condemned them. Not only did he full-throated reject it, but he attacked people that were promoting it. May of 2017, Sean Hannity became the single biggest advocate and champion of the idea that Hillary Clinton or somebody connected to her murdered Seth Rich. So much so that he launched his own investigation. There was this big scandal, right? Like, he ended up having to not apologize, but be quiet. But he promised he wasn't going to give up digging into the facts.
The family begged that they stop bringing up their dead son. I mean, it was very sad, right? Yeah.
And I look at that lesson and say, okay, well, how's he treating Q when he's confronted? And he has been confronted about it now. And instead of saying that's ridiculous and I don't believe that the demons are doing all this stuff, he said, I don't know anything about. I've never heard of the QAnon community. I've never heard of it. And what that tells me is he doesn't know which way to go, right? He doesn't know he thought that his audience, right, on balance rejected Q. And didn't align mostly with it, then he would embrace reducing it he would embrace sort of diminishing it for a lot of reasons. So my gauge from him was that he knows where his audience is, and his audience is the base, and he knew enough that he couldn't embrace it because he maybe doesn't know that they're fully there yet, but he sure as hell knew enough that he couldn't reject it whole scale. Even though he might take some bruises from not condemning it and pretending like he doesn't know about QAnon, which is nonsense because he's tweeted QAnon himself and QAnon # before, which is totally ridiculous of him to make that claim. But he knows where his audience is, and he knows enough that he couldn't embrace it because he maybe doesn't know that they're fully there yet, but he sure as hell knew enough that he couldn't reject it whole scale. Even though he might take some bruises from not condemning it and pretending like he doesn't know about QAnon, which is nonsense because he's tweeted QAnon himself and QAnon # before, which is totally ridiculous of him to make that claim. but I think that's to me where it goes, is that eventually we are already living in a lot of QAnon world, and many of the things that become conspiracies were sort of, to your point about it being an incubator, actually are smears and disinformation that have been laundered through the QAnon community at some point, even if they're not directly tied to the conspiracy. But I think much like the Tea Party became sort of like the central organizing engine of Republican politics for the Obama administration, the QAnon community will become the central organizing engine of the Republican Party as we know it. And you've seen it, Matt Gaetz embracing, and all these young guns. I mean, Tom Cotton is just pretty much right there to begin with. I mean, right. It's not that hard to imagine these other people going full QAnon, even if they change their name for a third time, which is probably what they'll do. They'll change their name, right? They'll call it something different, but it'll be the same nonsense.
Right. I mean, it's not exactly the same, but some parts of what you're talking about sort of brings me flashbacks to Gamergate and how there were the right-wing grifters like Milo Yiannopoulos and Mike Cernovich who, and with them, they knew how... they knew, this is the best way to put it, they knew how cucked those reactionary gamers were to them because,
that's right.
Oh, wow, these big right-wing personalities with a big profile are defending us. And like these guys openly shitted on gamers. They said they were nerds and they were losers, but they knew they had something there if they defended their right to have, their video games without women in as part of their community. That is what they knew they had to sort of throw the red meat to, and they had this audience wrapped around their finger. Sean Hannity and these guys aren't quite there where they could denigrate the QAnon audience quite yet. They're still probably worried they'd lose them. Yeah. But they know that these, if we just, these guys are just begging for some high profile person to believe in what they believe to be the truth. So that if you just do that, even though you look down upon these people, they'll think you are the greatest in the world. They will look up to you and follow you to the ends of the earth. And that's definitely what's going to happen there, I think.
Yeah, without a doubt. Like Jesse Waters. I mean, when he he did a QAnon segment on Fox News back in December of 2019, and he got a ton of traction for just doing that. And even more recently, when he said, there's some stuff that's a little wacky, but boy, they sure are onto some good things. And that's what'll happen, right? They'll start the process of making this much more acceptable. And then the other thing, and this is where I think it all comes full circle for me, and it is a real test, and we've seen this play out just a tiny bit in the last couple of days. Once this reaches national attention, it is subject to some of the traditional and typical both-sidesing false equivalences that we see with traditional political reporting and reporting. We saw that famous, that prominent pollster, right, David Wasserman, sort of compare Ilhan Omar.
That's exactly what I was thinking of. Right.
Green. I'm like, they're not the same. I mean,
not even close, right?
No, like you can't. They're not reflective of the two different things happening in each party. I mean, they're not the same. And I think I worry a little bit about that. And I will say that what happens over the next couple months with that part of the conversation is really going to also inform not necessarily the total outcome of how the Republican Party deals with it, but the timeline in which they do. The more false equivalencies, that means the more enabling they have to say, yeah, that's just our flank, get over it. It's totally normal to believe in demons.
Right. And one of the sorry to keep going. I know you said,
please, no, it's fine.
One of the things that's really interesting about this is, I mean, we've seen this with other sort of conservative movements, like the Tea Party had this going on, but this is much more openly like this, whereas the Tea Party, they wanted to be a legitimate political movement, at least the politicians who were running as Tea Party members, aside from the base, they were the frothing from the mouth with their conspiracies about Obama. But, there's no one like that here, really. Like, what we're seeing is, like, it's just the people who are using it because they're grifters and they know there's something to take from this. And then the full-on QAnon believers. There's no one who's really like... Because really, there's nothing. Like, you could be like a Tea Party person who's like, just to save face, you could be like, I'm not for the racism stuff. I'm here for the tax stuff. There's no, like, center here for QAnon. There's nothing that you can say, oh, I'm the serious QAnon person, because there's no topic of the conversation that is serious.
No, it's so true. And that's a really good point. And I think, I feel like, one of the things that you saw that I think proves your observation is back in April or so, Jim Watkins, who is the owner of 8chan, which is a prominent place where the Q community was organizing, and then it became 8kun. He started a QAnon super PAC for QAnon
Right.
candidates, and it did seem at the time that this was somebody that was trying to maybe not like hijack it, but to provide some of that like political sort of superstructure framework for exactly the kind of political power that you're talking about. And it didn't really, I mean, it exists, but it's barely a blip. It doesn't have, even though the community is bigger than ever, that thing never took off. And that to me is a pretty good indication that it's sort of two things. One, it validates your point that they don't want to do that. And then the bigger question to me is why? And I think the answer is really scary. It's that they don't believe in trying to change the system through those traditional means. They believe in might makes right and ends justify the means. And so this is sort of like old school, abortion, bombing, killing doctors. And I will tie that together by saying part of the reason we put more resources into QAnon a couple years ago was because, at that point it was the storm, and then they started to dabble with Q. But there was a longstanding, vehemently dangerous anti-choice organization called Operation Rescue. They've been around for decades. They have either been adjacent to or part of violence, but they were probably the first like big institutional thing to have like fully embraced the storm in QAnon back in the spring of 2018. And I mean, they really embraced it, like the leadership and their messaging. That's a red flag because like this is actually a right-wing institution that understands. I mean, part of the reason why we have difficulty with access to choice is because of what the anti-choice community did in this country for decades. Like they resorted to violence and it worked for them. And they sort of saw themselves as simpatico with this, right? And I think that gets back to the question and answer about the political power side, was that there was an effort to do that. There was probably nobody better positioned to do it than Jim Watkins, that guy that owns 8kun, which is where they organize, and it didn't happen. And I think it's because they don't want that. It's like if they need that, then it's too slow and not right, and they actually are going to engage in other means. And I think that's the part that really frightens me.
Right, and, going off that, the interesting thing with that is, there are a lot of leaderless movements out there. Like, let's take Antifa, for example.
Yep.
But they organize around the common belief of fighting fascism. They are anti-fascists.
Yeah.
QAnon is a leaderless movement that doesn't really agree on anything but, I guess, their love for Donald Trump. I mean, there is no organizing center, again, to use that word, because it's literally everyone who believes in Q and what he says. There's that general, people are trying to take down Trump, and there's a child trafficking ring that probably involves Satanists. But everything else is fair game for anyone to just make up on their own. There are people who believe that RFK is supporting Trump, and he never died. But, then there are people who say that's ridiculous. How can you believe that? By the way, the coronavirus vaccine is going to turn you into a lizard person. I mean, there's nothing that they are all in agreement on except for the fact that they are QAnon.
That's right. And that maybe Bill Gates, I think they probably agree on whether or not they acknowledge it, some of the like long-standing anti-Semitic tropes that are like powering a lot of this. I've seen even at Trump rallies and a lot of QAnon people constantly refer to Epstein and Weinstein as not necessarily sounding like Protestants. It's like, well, you could just say it at that point if you're going to make that argument. But they really try to tie in this idea that all of the big money and all of the big power seemingly behind prominent Democratic power are tied into this larger like globalist conspiracy theory. And they, so one, I think whether or not they acknowledge it, I think a lot of them believe in that. And they all really have seemed to rally around Bill Gates, though the extent to which he's trying to turn you into a robot, there's a lot of debate about. But they all have seemed to quickly tie. And the part that stuns me is it doesn't require very much. I mean, even just a whiff of a report that maybe he went to something with Epstein once was enough to be like, okay, done. Like now we're all in on anti-Bill Gates. And But you're right, and that I think it's like in a way I compare it. You said the word cult before, and I think that's a really fair comparison. The comparison that I often use, although I think cult is probably technically more accurate, is it feels a lot to me like the Reformation around period around Christianity, where you had the emergence, very rapid emergence of different sects because they all disagreed over this one little thing. Okay, I'm a new strain now of Christianity,
Right.
And it allowed for this incredibly fast fragmentation. Right, they still sort of centered around this idea of Jesus and Christianity, right? But they formed the way that they dealt with differences was not to actually cannibalize each other or to have these internecine battles that dragged on and try to resolve it at these big things. No, they just had schisms. They just broke into different components and continued in this atomized fashion. And it feels a lot like that. And that's why I think the QAnon audience lasts for a while, because their adaptability is in a way very similar to large religious movements that adapt, where they just form a different sect and continue to carry on their business.
Right. And they don't even need anything to actually, they just make things up wholesale, really, just to keep things going. Like, for example, this one I've been meaning to really focus on in a piece or something, because it's crazy to me. There is a growing attack on Tom Hanks, the actor, where QAnon people believe he is a pedophile. And listen, there are a lot of actors out there, and there, who have had these sort of issues where you can actually go after, and we've seen them actually get in trouble with the law. And but they're focusing on Tom Hanks. Why? Because they claim that they saw a document that puts Tom Hanks on the Epstein list. Yep. Now, you can actually access Epstein's flight logs. You can actually see, and yes, there are people like Bill Clinton and a lot of other people, Donald Trump, who are on these flight logs, and you can say, something's weird there. Let me, I'm going to look at them with a side eye and wonder what they did there. Guess who is not on the actual legitimate flight logs? Tom Hanks. But they claim, and a lot of them don't even know if they remember seeing the document themselves. They just claim that Tom Hanks is on this flight log, and that's that. He's a pedophile, and it's been going out there for every time Tom Hanks shows up in the news. Comments, he's a pedophile. He's when is a Q's coming for? You're in for Tom Hanks. Tom Hanks. I mean, it's just like it doesn't matter. It doesn't even it's not even like you mentioned the Bill Clinton thing. It's not even like they need something to tip them off. Like they don't even need, Bill Clinton's on the flight log, he's got to be a pedophile. They don't even need that. No, they will take anything and just make it up. Right.
That's right. They do. And they make it up, even though they're sort of making it up as they go along. A lot of what Q says, and because you're right, it's leaderless, is that it's actually the result of individual research. So you feel it. You're right. When I publish something or write something, it's mine. I put work into it. When somebody criticizes it, it upsets me. I want to defend it. My knee-jerk reaction is to defend the thing I just produced. And so a lot of what happens with the Q audience is that they are constantly repeating this idea of doing your own research. They almost have they've gotten so high on their own supply that they don't even accept the idea that they are consuming other people's exhaust and random stuff, and they count that as research. But that means that when they're actually saying something and amplifying something, they see that as their own work product that they have to vigorously defend because they came to that conclusion. And that's really so. Even if you show them the flight logs, they would say, "Well, it was engineered." The one that I looked at, that I got off of GitHub. And that somebody showed that was a little bit fuzzy, sure, and maybe the font was slightly different, but it definitely looked authentic, had Tom Hanks' name on it, or a very common alias that we all know Tom Hanks uses. Did you not know, right, that he uses the alias, Robert Jeffries? Because, yes, that is the common, right? That's the thing. They always have an answer for it. And so to your point about making it up, it's even in some ways worse because they make it up, but they count it as research, and then they are invested in the byproduct that makes it really hard to have an honest conversation with them about it.
Now that you mention that, I'm surprised none of them have floated the idea. Maybe I'm giving them the idea, but I'm surprised none of them have floated that Epstein's nickname for Tom Hanks was Donald Trump. And
it doesn't matter.
Trump wasn't really in those flight logs. Epstein was referring to Tom
It is it's so funny you say the Tom Hanks thing because my latest like Q rabbit hole like guilty pleasure if that's the way to describe it has been there's been this new push around finding all this like secret sex imagery in Disney movies, right?
Oh, that's yeah.
And and it's been around for a while, but the one that I love that they do is there's this like really on the nose one where they just take random screenshots and then like use the Paint app to just like write dirty words over like well if you look at the shadow here it says the word child, it says the words like no it didn't, you just scrawled that on there. Like that's not the same as finding some phallic kind of imagery in like the Little Mermaid castle,
Right.
like you're just writing words on a screenshot you took and pretending that that was actually part of the video. Like you're making that up. That wasn't there. But that's the stuff that takes off because they are so predisposed to believing anything. And look, a lot of the stuff that came out about Marjorie Taylor Greene today, I mean, she talked that Obama may have killed Seth Rich, right? She was a 9/11 truther. She believed that the Pentagon was shot by a missile, not an airplane. I mean, it's clear that there are other things that they believe that are not just this. Because
it'll get wrapped in there. If it's not already in there, it's going to become part of the Q lore.
Exactly.
Right.
That's right.
The Disney thing, and then you mentioning the defense thing made me think, like if you're actually doing research on something, if you're doing reporting, when a new piece of information comes out, you want to do a follow-up, even if it refutes your previous report, because that's what you're doing, you're reporting.
Right.
But if you're working on a piece of fiction, if someone criticizes that, then you're going to defend it because that's a part of you. Like that's something you made up. That's from your own head.
Right.
I mean, I think that's a perfect point you brought up because that's really, I mean, I think that gets to the really the heart of it here, that, even if they don't even realize it, they're defending things that they pretty much just pulled out of thin air.
Yes. And I think that's why your observation earlier about, that even though it's clearly started to transcend age demographics, that it is an online thing that is principally boomers and older people. If they weren't doing this, because this is a hobby, they spend hours. I listen to the calls where they talk about how much work they're doing. If they weren't doing this, they would be doing other things, right? Like paint by numbers or like pottery. Like they would have hobbies. And but this is a hobby for them. And so it's like when somebody has a little workshop or, they have an activity or a craft, they're really invested. Like even if they're not very good at like making things out of shells, like you don't go around saying like your shell collection is terrible, right? Because like you're friends or they're a loved one. And so you sort of support the thing that they're putting their time in because that's innocuous. And the thing is, instead of doing innocuous hobbies and other things, they're putting their energy into creating these byproducts that are just complete fictions. And there's no way you can't say nothing because you're validating it or engaging with it. But if you engage with it, it would be the same as just walking in and telling somebody the paint by number thing they did was total garbage, right? Like no one's going to do that because it's mean. And that's where I think it makes this really difficult because it is so deeply personal for a lot of the adherents and the people that really believe in it.
Angelo Carusone, president of Media Matters. I linked to some great pieces from Media Matters in the description of the YouTube channel and on the Patreon page. Where can people find you online? And also, if you can give us maybe a hint of what's coming next down the line from Media Matters related to QAnon, excuse me.
Sure. So I think one, you can go to MediaMatters.org, and that's our website, and you can follow us on Twitter at MMFA, and my Twitter handle is GoAngelo. And then in terms of what's coming next, I mean, the two big things that I think you'll start to see from us is one, a better sense of just how big the QAnon community is on Facebook. We've really been doing a lot of analysis there on unpackaging how big these networks are, just what their reach is, and then in particular a sense of their engagement trajectory, so that you could to really get some data to back up the general impression and the thing we all know that they've really grown really fast in the past few months. And that I think will be one big study that you see coming out, and then a little bit more work on the state legislature. Let's not forget that Congress isn't the only one, and when you start to go down that rabbit hole of the state legislatures, you start to see a lot of mini Marjorie Taylor Greenes that that are not on anybody's radar screen, that are saying just as much ridiculous things as she says, and are helping craft state policy and state law, some of whom are already in office.
And there's a whole lot more than 75 of the state
Certainly
legislators,
are.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Jeez. Thanks so much for joining me today. This was a great conversation. I got to have you or whoever's working on that Facebook study come on too, because we didn't even really touch upon the social media aspect of it. Yeah. This is just... Angelo, thanks so much. Have a great night.
You too.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to go to the second half of the show. And first of all, few notes here. Patreon.com/Matt Binder. Support the show, help it grow. And off of that, I just want to say you might realize that I am coming in crystal clear. You can see, if you're watching on the YouTube live stream or on Twitch or on Periscope right now or on Facebook Live, if you are watching this right now via video and not just listening on doomedpod.com where you get the audio version of the podcast, you must be going, what did Matt do to his webcam? It's like he's in my house. I could reach out and touch Matt, right? Thanks to my patrons, I was able to purchase a Panasonic Lumix G7 mirrorless 4K camera. I was able to purchase the Elgato Camlink, which connects this mirrorless camera, which is like a full-blown, like you could make an independent movie with this camera. It's that kind of quality. I mean, it's the middle end of these cameras. There's ones that are like thousands of dollars. This one's like a $500 camera. And I'm connecting it to the Camlink here, which connects it to my computer so I can use it as a webcam. This is actually what some of the big like live streaming channels and networks are doing now. And I think I don't even know if the majority port's got a camera like this in the office. I mean, I know Jamie from the Antifada, Matt Leck, and Brendan don't have one. I was on co-hosting with them today, and they were admiring my my new webcam setup. So I could, I think this is going to step up the game here. I'm looking forward to producing some standalone short YouTube content with this camera and getting that stuff out there. And I think this is going to help, show that this is a serious endeavor here. This is not just, some guy once a week going live. I mean, I think my content's already up to par. All that's left was to up the production. The next thing, thanks to my Patreons, is to upgrade this here microphone. I'm going to go from digital to analog and get some nice XLR mic with a mixer going into my computer. Hope my computer can handle this, actually, now that I think about it. But yeah, I'm going to read the names of the people who make this show happen, because without them, I couldn't do these upgrades. Abigail T, Alan B, Andrew H, Angela, Ari R, Ashley M, Baka, Ben, Benji, Bobby M, Brendan H, Brian S, Brosnan, Candide, Champagne Kami, Chris F, Christine H, Cindy G, Colin R, Connor R, CT A, Cul-de-sac, Cyber Snowstorm, D, Dan, Dank Uger, Dave K, David Z, Daya, Douglas V. Daya, thanks for the shout out of Majority Port today, by the way. I remember you. Douglas V. Dragon Slayer. Eugene B. Fraz K. Free Hat. FTW All Day. Graham C. Greywind. Greg D. Greg D with 2 G's. Grim. Helmi. Hitesh. Igor D. In Our Words. Invisible Ninja. Jack D. Jacob W. James K. Jameson Test. Janelle A. Going to the next page now. Jasmine H. Jeremy M. JLS. John B. John S. Jonathan B. Joseph H. Joseph R. Joyce M. Justin S. Katie S. Kaushal. Kirk G. Kyle. Lisa D. Mariah. Mark L. Mark S. Maddie J. Max W. Me, Melissa M, Mitch V, Michael B, Michael J, Michael M, Mr. Danks, NS, Nick, Nicole A, Nam Denet, Null Style, O Death, Penelope D, Philip W, Rad Dad, Remy, Rondi, Ryan C, Ryan O, Scott H, Scott R, Seth K, Shabazz, Sheena, Silicon Baby, Stephen R, Stephen S, Steve A, TM. Going to a third page now, folks. Tammy G, This Is Not Pizza, Tina M, Tom M, Why That Thai Guy, Wutopian, Zach M, and last but not least, Zoe. We are now at the point where I cannot read everyone on every show. But I wanted to do it one last time now that we've broken past the first goal. And I've done some of these upgrades. And again, I wouldn't be able to do it without you guys. YouTube.com/Matt Binder. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Going into the second half of the show now, I will be reading comments from the Super Chats. Also getting to be too much to read all the comments here in YouTube like I used to try to do. It was insane for me to try to do that then. It would be impossible for me to do it now. I learned that the hard way while reading some of the IMs and taking phone calls on the Majority Report the past couple of weeks. On that show, you get lucky if you even get through, 10% of everything they get, IMs and phone calls combined. So youtube.com/Matt Binder. Drop a super chat during the live stream. I will read your question or comment. What else? Oh, find me on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, wherever you are on social media platforms. I'm probably there as @MattBinder. The few that I'm not, just search Matt Binder, and I'll probably be the first person that shows up because, I don't know, there's one or two other Matt Binders out there who got there before me, apparently. Yeah, guys. Tell your favorite podcaster and YouTuber about this show. Tell them you want to see me on their show. Tell them you want to see them on this show. And then let me know. I've been having a great time on the Majority Report, filling in for Sam with the MR crew this past couple of weeks. I believe there's one last show I'm scheduled to do, and that's next week. And then I think they take a week break, and then August is done for them, I think. I think that's what they're doing the last week, taking a week break, I think. I don't know. I'm not sure. But that's all I'm booked up to. So if you want to see me on that show, let Sam know you've been enjoying me on that show if you've been watching it. If you haven't been watching it, you should watch. Yeah. I was saving this for last. And I think I've hit everything. Today would have been the 37th birthday of my former co-producer on the Majority Report and my co-host for Matt and Mike Mondays on the Majority Report, Michael Brooks, who I guess if you don't know, I doubt you're learning from this show, but sadly suddenly passed away on July 20th, and August 13th is his birthday. And it's, very, one of those things where you're just like, you've got a lot of feelings, you know what I mean? I told the show a story earlier on the Majority Report that I'll share here to end this half of the episode, because it's a nice story. Him having a birthday reminded me of a memory. I've got tons of them in my head that come to me every couple of days that I totally hadn't thought of in a while. And 5 years ago, on July 9th, my son Ezra was born. He's now 5 years old. He was born July 9th, 2015. And at the time, I was working at the Majority Report. And that day, obviously, I did not go into the show. I was at the hospital. My son was born. And my dad IM'd into the show, as he usually does. But that day, he IM'd in to tell Sam and Michael that the baby was born. And they congratulated me on air. And I believe Sam played the shofar. And fast forward to show's over, which is a few hours after my son was born. And I get a call from Michael. And he's congratulating me, which I knew he was going to call me to congratulate me anyway. But I also sort of knew why he called me directly at that time. Now, remember, this isn't like that night where, my kid was already born for 12, 15, 20 hours. I'm talking just maybe 2-3 hours out of, in the room. Get a call from Michael. Congratulations. And then he finally gets to it. he needs some tech help with everything for the show. You got to put up the podcast, got to do the YouTube feed, the YouTube clips. I believe Sam was recording Ring of Fire episodes after the majority part went off air then, so I believe he was also calling me for help setting that up, because I would also produce that side of setting everything up for Sam when I was there. And it was just like, wow, man, I went over all of this with you in anticipation for me being out for a few days. But that was Michael. Never one brilliant political mind, super nice and guy, hilarious. Like one of those like people who you were like, wow, that's like a triple threat. He could do it all, except when it came to tech stuff. And I don't even mean anything crazy. I mean like just the basics. Just wasn't for him. But I'm happy he called, obviously. Especially in light of this unforeseeable event, because I'll never forget him, and he'll always be a part of my life based on me working with him for so many years, and this show being so intertwined with my work at the Majority Report to begin with. I mean, my whole trajectory in political media really is intertwined with Sam hiring me for the Majority Report. But whenever, on a personal level, whenever I tell people, and my son included, about the story of the day my firstborn was, born, Michael Brooks will be part of that story for his hilarious call asking for tech help just hours after my son was born. Happy birthday, Michael. I wish you were here, buddy. All right, folks, going to the second half of the show. Be back next week. On both the Majority Report and on Doomed. So until then, again, see you in the patron half now. Otherwise, see you all next time on Doomed. We're back. I am back. The one-man show here. Producer, tech guy, editor, set everything up, content creator, booker. I get the guests. I prepare for the show. It's God, how great it would be to have someone helping do all that. Eventually, right? Eventually, we'll get there. We'll get there. Show is slowly but surely growing. Let's get to. We got a super chat here. Let me get to the. We got a few super chats here. Let me make sure I get to them. One thing I did notice is that using this 4K camera as the webcam, my computer's going a little bit slower. I gotta ask you guys, are you noticing any lag with two things? The video alone, like is the video choppy? And then two, are the audio and video, or my voice and my video synced up? So is the video choppy on its own? And then secondly, is the video and audio coming through together? Just want to make sure that I have everything. I asked earlier for the Majority Report, but that goes through Zoom. I use something different for this show. I want to make sure it's working for that too. Let me know while I read these super chats. Samantha! Thank you, Samantha, for the super chat. New member, love your work. Happy birthday, Michael. Thank you, Samantha, so much. I'm going to give you I don't got the shofar, but as people who tuned in last week know, I now have a little soundboard going. I'm going to give you the old DJ air horn. Or I can give you this. S. Feliciano with the super chat. We value the work of the whole team. Talking about the majority report, I assume, because I am the whole team here. Unless you are talking about just me for this show. Don't stop. For the next gen, our children, we mourn the loss of Michael. Continue to keep his spirit alive. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm trying to, listen, I'm not going to try to do what Michael did with the way he covered things, because I'm just not, that's not my forte. Those aren't my beats. However, if you, and I bring this up because I think this is the perfect example of how I can continue to cover some of the stuff Michael would cover, but in my wheelhouse. If you look at how I covered the Bolivia coup, I did 2 shows. The debate, which you know about me, I'm all about debating people on the right. I debated someone who helped push the coup online. And then I did a show with someone who uncovered why there were so many pro-coup Twitter accounts when the coup happened at the end of last year. And that was a fascinating interview. And again, that's my, it's sort of my, you guys know the topics I cover on this show. Mostly tech, and the intersection of tech and politics. Mostly far-right movements. I mean, I would say that's the backbone of the show. Online conspiracy theories. The name of the show is Doomed, and I'm trying to branch out more into just all aspects. Since the pandemic, I've done multiple shows on the pandemic. The idea is that we're doomed, really. And I cover those topics, but in the trademark Matt Binder way. Renee with the super chat. We call that a circo pobre here in Chile, when the ringmaster is the lion tamer, and he also cuts tickets at the carny. Oh, good. What was that? I think I just saw someone. Dank Uger called me the super host deucer, right? Because everyone calls Matt Leck super producer Matt Leck over on the Majority Report, right? Well, I do it all, folks. Samantha says, no lag on video, audio and video coming through perfect. Pernicon says, everything is working. Steve P says, everything is perfect. Putin! Vladimir Putin says, the stream is solid. AV excellent. Thank you, Mr. Putin. I appreciate it. Stream is solid. AV excellent. Oh man, I got an updated Adobe Flash Player pop up right now. Come on. Are you kidding me? I honestly have not gotten one of those in years. Why did that just pop up? Jeez. What a throwback. Yeah, it was a lot of. I've been having a lot of fun doing the Majority Report shows. I see people saying, talking about Michael. Nicholas says you finally pulled a Brooks and sold out. Dank says about me saying I wasn't going to read everything because I've learned my lesson. He says all that, but watch him read the YouTube chat. LMAO, right. Melon Lord says, I always write while listening to Michael Brooks. So sad I won't finish the series listening to him. Oh, you're writing a book. Oh, you had comments earlier. Again, I'm not trying to... You guys force me now to go back and look at all the comments. I'm trying not to read all the comments. You're writing a book, Melon Lord. Cool. What's the book about? I don't think I'm... background book writing material. Not saying Michael was reduced to background. I'm just saying I think his delivery could be very soothing in the type of way that's sort of, I guess that's what made him also, some people prefer that in terms of, just really relaxing to listen to so you could really absorb the information. I, on the other hand, I need to be. I need someone to. Really, I guess maybe that's where my delivery comes from. I need someone to punch me in the face. I can't listen to background stuff. I need complete silence if I'm working on something. So, not true. I need background television, but that's just because it's a show in the background or whatever. But I can't listen to something to pay attention to. That's not happening. You know, I throw on like an SVU marathon or whatever it is on TV, or just put Game of Thrones episodes on repeat because I've already watched it. I don't need to pay attention. It's just like something in the background. The background show. But I wouldn't dare to listen to like Michael Brooks or any podcaster I enjoy in the background. I wouldn't retain anything. I'm not that type of person. Maybe I should get to this. This is another thing I brought up on the MR, which is really more of a doomed stuff, but I wanted to talk about it there to give people a taste of doomed. Let me talk about this one. Oh, what? My dad says, yeah, that's right. Binder Dad himself in the chat. There's been about 5 to 6 lags, but voice picture is aligned. Maybe that was on your end, Pops. I don't know. No one else said there was any lag. Now my dad's got me all worried that it's lagging. Oh boy, let me get to this because this is Nicola D with the $20 super chat. Thank you, Nicola. I wanted to call in and talk about that whole power dynamics. Can a university employee have sex with a student at all? Is it only bad, etc.? I love Jamie, but as a guy who lived this, I disagree with her take on power and harm. So he says, because let me be, no fake news here. It was technically a $19.99 super chat. And so he goes, wow, not even $20? How cheap. Steve says, Michael had a very smooth delivery. Made his commentary easy to digest. Yes, I didn't want to miss that one because we're about to go off on a whole thing here. And I know the super chats the chats are going to get beyond me. I sort of got to set this up, right? I can't leave. I can't just go off because not everyone who listens to this show. There's a big, obviously, overlap between this show and the Majority Report. But I got to say, I am shocked at the number of people who've reached out to me and said, honestly, I knew of you from wherever, from Twitter, your other work or whatever. And I found out about the Majority Report from you. I mean, it's not the majority of people, but way more than I would have ever imagined. And so I gotta remember that. I mean, sorry, Sam Cedar, not everyone is the Majority Report listener. I gotta. All right, so here we go. I mean, and I had Jamie and Matt Leck on the Majority Report feeding me some information about this as we were going, because honestly I didn't have this prepared. I just was I'm familiar with the story from reading it, and there was a lot of talk about it in the Majority Report instant messenger chats to the point where I couldn't really, and then on Twitter people were really messaging me about that, especially with what Jamie was saying, and so I couldn't ignore it. So I don't have this, it's not a prepared story, I don't have all the details in front of me, but I know the gist of the story here. So Alex Morse is an insurgent progressive running for office for House in Massachusetts. He is the mayor of the town of Holyoke, and he's been the mayor of Holyoke since he's 21 years old. He's 30 now, so he's pretty much been a public figure for almost the entirety of his adult life so far. And he's backed by Justice Democrats, by the Sunrise Movement, by, I believe, Indivisible, and a number of other, I think even Working Families has backed him, and a number of other progressive groups and names. I know he was doing some on-the-ground work for Jamal Bowman And I know a number of those Justice Democrat-backed candidates have also come out and endorsed Alex Morse for his run. And, he was just running your basic insurgent campaign when all of a sudden, I think it was a few days ago, I think last week actually, a letter is published in, I believe the school is the University of Massachusetts Amherst College. There is a college Democrats group on that campus, and they published a letter, an open letter, in the school newspaper, alleging that Alex Morse had inappropriate relations with students. And Alex Morse has come out and he has apologized because he says that it is true that he has had relations with students. However, he also points out, and I think this is an important distinction, regardless of whether you think it's appropriate to have relations with students or not, because this distinction takes it to a different level. He makes the important distinction that he never had any relationship, never dated even, any student who was a student of his. Now, I believe he is an adjunct professor, meaning he was a part-time professor, just taught a few classes, wasn't full-time. And for a few years, I think the last time was for the previous semester. And that was that, though. That was what came out. And the story was that here you have this 30-year-old man running for Congress who was dating his students, and the power dynamics there is bad, obviously, to a lot of people. That was the story that ran here. Now, you had to really step back and take a look at this one, because this is something I realized right away, which is why I wasn't really following this too closely at first, because something felt off about it. So I was quiet until yesterday about this. Not because I didn't want, I just needed more information before I was able to form an opinion of what was going on here. I think that's important to do. There was never any actual victim who came out and said, Alex Morse did this to me. There was never any allegation from someone who experienced anything from Morse who came out and said, yeah, I was taken advantage of, or, at the time I didn't think anything of it, but looking back, the age difference was too big, and him as a teacher, it was just inappropriate. No one came out and said that. It was just an open letter from this college Democrats group alleging that, and this from their, basically coming from a secondhand source, they're a third party in all this, they were alleging that there were people who were students who had relations with Morse. Something just felt off about it. And again, I believe victims when they come out and make allegations. If a woman or man was to come out and say that they were raped by an individual or taken advantage of by an individual or were inappropriately treated by an individual, I would believe them. But no person came out saying that. So the story becomes just sort of like you heard it through a source, through the grapevine, basically. Now, but still, a lot of people on the left then turned against Morse. You had some of these groups that backed him, didn't unendorse, but they pulled back any financial backing. Individuals did unendorse and back off their support of Morse. And it just created this whole infight here. And then yesterday, things start to drop. The Intercept publishes a report where basically the former president and current chief strategist of the Amherst College Democrats group apparently had told people in the College Democrat group that the incumbent, the establishment Democrat that Rep. Neal, I believe his name is, that Morse is primarying, was going to basically be, and this isn't verbatim, but the gist here was that, and he said it pretty abruptly, like I'm going to, like really, like it wasn't like, beating around the bush here. He pretty much openly said in different wording that Rep Neal was going to be his ticket into a career in politics. He apparently was also doing some work for the incumbent Neal's campaign. And, he said a lot of inappropriate things that made it seem like, this isn't someone who is nonpartisan here. This sounds like someone who has an agenda. Again, things begin to drop, but that alone, to me, was not enough. It told me that, yes, I was right in holding off and that we have to look further into this. But that alone's not enough, because just because this one individual has this bias, an agenda here, that doesn't mean that this entire letter from this whole organization is without merit. But then we get even more information. A second Intercept report drops later in the evening yesterday. That basically, what happens here is people leak to the Intercept screenshots of private DMs and chats where members of this college Democrat group, including the aforementioned chief strategist and former president of the group, who was connected to Neal and saw Neal as his ticket into politics, were strategizing in these groups to set Morse up. Now, apparently, they had heard these allegations, or they not even really allegations, they had heard that Morse had relations with students on the campus, and they wanted some sort of gotcha, something to take him down, because clearly to them, they thought that a 30-year-old teacher dating people who go to that school but aren't his students wasn't enough of a scandal to take him down, because in my opinion, it's not as well, and that they needed something more. And so I want to actually take a second here to get this pulled up, because these chats, I read them on the show. These chats are something else, really. Something else. I mean, here they are. One second, pulling them up. And here, I'll pull them up on the screen too here. All right, so let me make sure you could see them on the, okay. So the chats are sent to Morse and another individual who's part of this College Democrats group, who is, they're exchanging chats in this group. Excuse me, they're exchanging private messages here. And the individual who's part of this College Democrats group says to Morse, "Thank you. Good to see you too," smiley face. Now, I'm assuming this conversation starts after Morse attends an event for the Amherst College Democrats. Because I should add the addendum, I forgot to mention this. In their open letter, they also say that Morse will be uninvited from all future Amherst College Democrats functions because of these allegations. So, thank you. Good to see you too, smiley face. And Morse replies, "How was the rest of your weekend?" To which this Amherst College Democrat says, "Pretty good. I went home last night to surprise my mom for her birthday. HBU. How about you?" Morse replies, "That's nice. How was that? I had an event to go to last night to speak. Then I had a wine tasting party at a friend's house. Now I am in North Adams about to march in a parade." And now that's the end of the DMs between Morse and that Amherst College Democrat. We now go to the chat in that private group strategizing how to take Morse down that was leaked to the Intercept, where he posted that screenshot of his conversation with Morse, and he tells his fellow College Democrats in their strategy group, read that message. Also, don't mind me totally leading him on. I don't know what in that message from Morse was at all inappropriate. I don't see how it was even flirty or seductive or hitting on someone or luring anyone in or leading anyone on. I don't know what, like I said in the majority report earlier, I don't know what the kids are using for sexual innuendo slang nowadays, but about to march in a parade doesn't ring any bells. I don't know any of them that have to do with that. So they were openly strategizing in here how to take Morse down. They apparently didn't get what they wanted, but they used those chats as the basic backbone of their allegations and ran with Morse being an inappropriate deviant, I guess, anyway. I mean, let's really say what this is here, and a lot of people are now pointing this out, even though they were being shut down for pointing this out earlier. Alex Morse is an openly gay man. He is a openly gay mayor, an openly gay politician. He's an openly gay man running for office. And this really hits upon a lot of homophobic tropes. This is essentially a homophobic attack on Morse. And it's quite frankly disgusting. And a lot of people are now coming out and actually defending Morse about this. And in fact, I just saw earlier that there were, let me pull this up actually. Again, I wasn't planning on talking about this, but you guys ask, and I'm gonna speak to the story. Where is this? Come on. All right, give me a second, because it's important to, because there was the College Democrat group has come out and apologized. Essentially, not as full-heartedly as I think they should, but they've apologized in a sense about what went on. They've condemned the homophobic attacks. And this is College Dems of Massachusetts, broadly. College Dems of MA. So this isn't the Amherst group specifically. The College Democrats of Massachusetts president has apologized. And apparently, because of the Massachusetts Democratic Party's connection to the College Democrats, it's loosely affiliated, but it is an affiliated group with the state party. The state party is opening up an investigation into what went on here. And I want to add this extra bit of information that came out. A reporter with Business Insider, once the Intercept report was published, she came out and shared really interesting information on Twitter. She said that back in April of this year, she received an email from an anonymous address, creepyalexmorse@protonmail.com, with this same letter from College Democrats trying to get her to run a story. And they had also given her the name of 3 students who would corroborate the allegations for her story. Now, she said to her something didn't feel right, something was off, and so she didn't pursue the story, didn't write up anything on it. What sort of happened was once the college newspaper published the story, Politico and other outlets felt that they had to write about it because it was published by the college newspaper, and that's how this all became more of a national event. But she said the 3 people who were offered up to her, who would basically confirm the allegations, 2 out of 3 of those people were part of that strategy chat that was leaked to the Intercept to take down Morse. So all in all, this was a hit job. This was full on a hit job against a young, gay, progressive man who is running an insurgent campaign to take down the incumbent, the establishment incumbent. And on top of that, it's just come out that a lawyer for, an attorney for the state party provided pro bono services for the Amherst College Democrat group when they were putting together that letter attacking Morse. So there is something going on here. Now, Neil, who was the incumbent, Richie Neil, I think his name is, his full name is, he originally was, he didn't apologize or really do anything like that, but he originally was talking up these students for being brave or what have you. And now he's backed off on that. So it remains to really be seen what happens next here. Apparently, Morse is going... any group that backed off Morse has now full-blown come back out and say they're back in. They've given their re-endorsement. They've given Morse financial help once again. In fact, some of them have doubled down on their efforts and are providing more financial help in light of what happened. Just a full-on shit show, really, going on here. Really. It's just incredible. And now that the political end of it is out of... it seems to be wrapping up a bit in terms of what actually happened to Morse. It's turned into this whole discussion about the inappropriateness of what Morse did, regardless of the attacks and the hit job. Listen, if I was a teacher... this is an issue that will come up with me because I am not on the market. I've been taken for quite some time. I've been out of the dating scene for more than a decade. God, I don't know what I would do if I was an adult and had to go on dates. I mean, it seems like the safe time to date is when you're in like high school, high school and college. Then that's it. Anytime after that, you're treading on thin ice in terms of safety and who you could be going on dates with. And then, of course, there's things like this where you could be construed as doing something inappropriate. It's just, I don't know, bless you to anyone who's got a date in this as an adult over the age of mid-20s, I guess. If I was a teacher, though, I would not have any relations with students. I wouldn't want the problems. I wouldn't want the also I don't for me personally, I just don't want to intertwine the two. It's just going to cause too many problems, even if they're not my students. It's just... But at the same time, for people who defend that, I mean, I went to college and I had classmates. I went to college like right after high school. So here I am, late teens, early 20s, and I had classmates who were in their 40s and 50s. I mean, there's no set age for college. Yes, you're usually in your late teens, early 20s, maybe even mid-20s if you go to college, but there are a lot of people who go to college in late 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. It's not so cut and dry here. But anyway, I mean, the student thing aside, which at the same time, I don't think it's something that's disqualifying. It's a personal thing. I mean, the age comes into play here, to be quite honest with you. For me, a 30-year-old teacher dating a 21, 22-year-old student, I don't see a problem there so much. Again, I wouldn't do it because I wouldn't want the hassle and the issues with... Again, I wouldn't want to intermingle those things. But it just doesn't seem that out of bounds for me in terms of the age differential and the power dynamic. If you're not this person's student. I mean, and it's not like, it's very possible that he was having relations with people who could assuredly never be his student. I mean, you pick a major, and if you're like, if you want to be a doctor, you're probably never going to end up crossing paths with, if you're learning to be a doctor, you're probably never going to cross paths with someone who's a film student. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, you're never going to end up taking a class from a film teacher. It just seems like something that's possible to completely avoid, too. It's just not that out there for me. I don't know. But when it comes to the age difference, too, early 30s and early 20s, that's not that crazy. You were both kids at the same time when you were kids. I mean, that's not that crazy to me. It really isn't. less than a decade difference. That's really not that. If you want to talk about as the ages get further apart, would I think it's a bit odd for a 60-year-old to date a 21-year-old? Yeah. I wouldn't, if again, who am I to judge in some aspects? And the 21-year-old is an adult, and it's completely legal for her to do. And as long as she's not being taken advantage of, or he, again, it could be a young man too, as long as he or she isn't being taken advantage of, and it's a fully consensual relationship without any sort of, anyone taking advantage of anyone with the power dynamics of someone being more rich or powerful or whatever, I think it's fine. Again, something I wouldn't do because it's not for me, but who are you to judge people who love each other? Really? I mean, that's really what it comes down to for me. Again, as long as it's consensual and no one's being taken advantage of, I don't know what to... I mean, isn't our whole thing that we let people who are adults, isn't it the left's whole thing that, two adults can consent to do whatever they want within the legal boundaries, and as long as they're not hurting anyone else, who are we to judge or rain on their parade? I don't know. I don't know what to... I don't see the issue there. And, I brought up on the majority report, and I feel for her too, but I just brought it up as in terms of how people looked at the two things and how they were covered. Katie Hill had to resign. She was a congresswoman in California. She had to resign because her husband was, I believe they were undergoing a divorce, or she had, I think the thing was, he was upset that she had cheated on him, I think. There was some sort of marital affair going on there. Marital issue, I should say more accurately. It did eventually come out that she was in a relationship with a former staffer of hers. And this all came to light because her husband went on a full-blown character assassination on her. He leaked provocative, really revenge porn photos on her. She released her nudes, or facilitated the release of them, I should more accurately say. And it's horrific. And the real story there is that her husband tried to take her down, and essentially he did ruin her political career and tried to ruin her life. And that's the real story there. The side story we could talk about, but isn't the main thing to focus on, is whether it was appropriate for her to have a relation with a former staffer. I mean, we can have that same conversation about that dynamic there, but that's not the point of the story. The point of the story, which everyone rightfully focused on, was the attacks on her from an ex. Yet, with the Morse story, the focus at first was on him and the inappropriateness. Not whether this was a hit job, and why would a letter come out alleging these things when there were no victims coming out saying this. That's my take on it. What do you guys think? Let's see. Grim, who always has something to say here. All right. David Slavic and Heidi Matthews. Now, David Slavic is a producer on the Michael Brooks show, who Grim has issues with in terms of... we'll have to get into that because I don't quite... Frankly, still don't quite get it. But says that Grim alleges here that not only think teachers effing students and employers are cool, they also want to abolish age of consent laws. I don't know if that's their opinion. I don't know anything about this, so I'm not going to go any further. I personally do not want to abolish age of consent laws. Renee says even a TA is an imbalance of power. Well, if the teaching assistant is your teaching assistant, sure. But if not, I mean, again, if the issue, if you have, if you're thinking about this as if this is someone who can be their student, but not necessarily in college. I mean, would a college student have looked at this odd if I saw a fellow student dating a teacher? Sure, I probably would have. But now, being older and knowing more about how the world works, again, I still wouldn't do it because I personally would think it's inappropriate for me to do in terms of doing it. But I find nothing, frankly, wrong with it in terms of a sense of it being, I don't think it's like, just should be like, I'm having a mental block. But you know what I'm saying. Renee says, wait till they graduate. Save some grief. Yes. Yeah. Steve says, yeah, it's still a bad idea and unprofessional. Well, yes, sure. You could argue that. But again, if someone's no longer a teacher, what does that have to do with him running for office? I mean, I don't... Nicholas says, that's my issue, like especially with the gay-male relationships, and I know it'll upset people, but the sex and gender dynamics matter, and it is different in some ways, so obviously not all. I have actually heard from a lot of gay men who are sharing their experiences online who have said that it was those relationships with older gay men who helped them find their place in the world as a gay person. And how they wouldn't be where they are today if it wasn't for... I mean, again, it's something that straight people maybe cannot understand. I mean, think about it in this aspect, and I'm not going to get too into it because I'm not a gay person, so I can't speak to it from experience. But my understanding is, if you're a young gay person, you're more likely to not be out and maybe trying to hide it. So how are you going to have a relationship with someone your own age? You would have to out yourself. And what if that person who you are interested in turns out to maybe not be gay or maybe not be interested in you? Even if they are gay, they could decide they want to out you and ruin you for all you know. You don't know. But if, older gay men, they're out of school, they don't have to worry about that issue of, their friends ruining their lives, because kids can be awful in terms of bullying and ruining you could have no friends because your socialization bubbles are pretty much your school friends. Maybe some kids at the schools around town, but that's, So you build a relationship with an older gay man who is out and doesn't worry about those things. I get it. I mean, it's something to consider. I totally get it. And it's something maybe you can't understand if you're not in the LGBT community. I'm not saying that there aren't older gay men who also take advantage and do inappropriate things. Sure, that's everyone, that's straight or gay. But there seems to be something extra important for young LGBT people with this dynamic where it's something that's where the homophobic attack comes from on Morse. Silicon Baby says, yes, the reaction is very overblown. Champagne Kami says, you have actual leftists unironically saying we need to raise the age of consent to 35. LOL. There is no one who legitimately said that. Are you serious? Who? I gotta know. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just in shock if that's an actual thing. Zoe says 35. I don't want to wait 15 more years. Zoe, you're 20? Or you don't want to wait for someone who is 20 to be 35? I don't know. Melon Lord says, economic power dynamics? Come on now, let a person level up. My hubby also makes more money than me. That's not necessarily what I meant. What I meant is there are relationships where a man usually, but I'm sure this happens with women too, a man who has a high-paying job and has a lot of money dates someone who is younger and does not have a job and convinces them to not get a job. And then that person's entire life revolves around and depends on that man's income, which allows that man to take advantage of that woman. That's where a lot of domestic violence issues come from sometimes too. And she is forced to be with them because she can't leave because she has no economic out. And the man knows that. And that's why he did things that way, to make sure she didn't have a job and a career. I mean, it's a dynamic at play. It's not a wife making more than her husband. That's not what I'm talking about. It's someone purposely using the fact that their partner is literally tied to them and has no recourse if they need to leave because they have no income stream. That's what I'm talking about. Samantha says, I don't understand how a random teacher on campus has any power over you. A direct teacher-student relationship is one thing, but this isn't that. Well, I can see if you have an English student dating like someone who's like the head of the English department, there's certain, even if they don't have them as a teacher, I can totally see the issues arising there. But again, if you're at a college where there's multiple different majors, I went to an art school, and as a film student, I never ended up taking any classes from some of the other majors. There was a fine art major, never took a class under fine arts, yet they were fine art teachers. There were like architecture teachers, never took an architecture class. There were photography classes, photography major, never took a photography class. As a film student, I was focused solely on moving picture. I did overlap with some animation and computer graphics. That was a separate major, but I did take some classes there because as a film student, I was interested in that and wanted some basics with like After Effects. So again, I could see where there's overlap, but in general, I went to the same school that some teachers taught at, and I knew for a fact I would very likely, if not almost assuredly for some of them, never be one of their students. I mean, it's just the case here. Nicola says, fucking LOL, that's called life. Sorry, I don't do this. Some of these chats will be in response to other people in the chat that I just don't see. So I'm sorry but I'm reading them because there's something there in the main point. I was with a guy 5 years younger than me. He had more money than me. Was I in a power imbalance? This stuff isn't so simple. Sorry. No, I think I got to that later on. I think this is before I said what I said. I gotta catch up with the feed. I don't think I could read any of these older things when I was talking about the Moore story in general, because we're gonna be off the. Yeah, I'm lost in some of these comments, so I gotta catch up with. 1 second, let me just pull up here. Champagne Kami says, some people think they're the ultimate judge, Binder. Listen, this is definitely something where people can have differing opinions, and I think all opinions are fine. I'm just saying you shouldn't end someone's career over these differing opinions. I mean, it's not. This doesn't rise to that. I mean, you can certainly think something's unethical or inappropriate, but not think that that individual in totality is bad or can't carry out a completely separate job. I mean, it could make you question certain aspects, maybe not want to vote for someone, but to say they can't run over this doesn't seem like... Wait. Where are we going with this, Zoe? The problem is 12 and 22. Is that one of them? Is 12? Wait, it's not the gap because I'm 18. No. The age gap begins at the legal age of 18. And yes, I do think it's a little bit weird for someone to date someone who's much older to date someone that's on the cusp there. Because, again, but also there's different levels of maturity. There are 18-year-olds who act like they're 15, possibly even younger, 14. That's where there's certainly an issue with people dating those 18-year-olds. But then there's also 18-year-olds who act like they're 30. There's different levels of maturity. I would say for myself, actually, I've always felt like I am a little bit, my maturity level is a little bit behind in the age that I am. I've noticed this for very long, honestly. If you look at the old Majority Report episodes, even when I started working there in 2011, I look much younger than I was. I was in my 20s already when I started working for the Majority Report. I feel like I could have easily passed for like 18. If maybe even younger to some people. And it continued up until I was like, I couldn't fully really grow this beard until I was in my late 20s. Like I was lacking in even this. Couldn't even get this going in my mid to late 20s. And the reason I wanted a beard was because without it, I look like I'm 18, 19. Maybe not so much anymore, but I'm going to look younger. I shave it. And that just looks. I've also felt like, in terms of just my overall maturity, at 18, I was probably not acting quite like an 18-year-old. This is interesting. Oh, so he says, Matt, I was talking about something else. Okay, yeah, I lost the conversation here. I was very confused. Melon says, when I was young, I felt old, and now I feel younger than people my age. Right. I think we should move on from this convo. I see it's causing a lot of... it's an important conversation to have, but I don't want people to get all upset over it. I want everyone to... I think we could pause it for now and continue that conversation if you want to another day. Safeli Shano with another super chat. Stepped away, but yes, you are part of the team. The movement. Right. Okay, that was in reference to the earlier super chat about being part of the team. I get you. Thank you. Yeah, it's an interesting conversation to have, but I don't want people getting all upset. We don't have to get upset about this. Wasn't expecting to go that long. We're gonna wrap it up. I wanted to... I know I did this on the Majority Report, but there's an update to it that I actually published a story after the show today at Mashable that I want to discuss. So I'm gonna read this last super chat. I'm gonna do this story. If there's any other super chats, I'll read that. And that's that. So get in any super chats you want now while I hit this story, and then that's it. We'll call it an episode. Invisible Ninja with the $4.99 super chat. Here's the $5. Oh, not $5. $4.99, you mean? Here's the $5 you asked for to read my am on MR. Thanks. How much did you say it would cost for a retweet of my comic? Wink. A winky face. Love you, Matt. Happy birthday, Brooks. Oh, this is your letter hack, right? Don't worry about it. You don't have to. I'm happy to read that. That was great art. Really nice art, actually. Yeah. Ooh, this mail, this postal service stuff is really... is really, starting to. I believe I saw a story where they're removing mailboxes in certain cities. What? I'll have more on that. Jesus. I was saying to someone the other day that honestly, once a week doing this show is not enough. It's getting to the point where I need to do more episodes, honestly. Problem is, I need the show to grow to do that, because I need to be able to convince my family that I can take more time away from them to do the show. Because it will be financially worth it to them. So, patreon.com/MattBinder if you are somehow accessing this without being a patron subscriber. Well, you could access this through the live stream if you aren't a patron subscriber. Patrons get the easy to listen to audio version of this that everyone else doesn't. Oh, Dank with the $5 super chat. Email Sam and tell him to book Matt for more shows. Right. If you like me on MR, you got to tell Sam you like me on MR. And who knows what will happen, because I'm booked up to next week, folks. And then I don't think he knows what he's doing yet. So it's not that I'm done completely. Who knows? But there's no guarantee after next week. I mean, I'm sure he'd have me back on. But in terms of me having a regular position on the show, where I'm going to be on an episode a week, that's not going past next Thursday, folks. Melon says, more Matt on MR. So he says, we're your real family, Matt. Join us. Cefalciano says, seriously, you make a difference. More episodes. Nicholas says, why can't we keep the Thursday thing going? Samantha says, MR needs you, Matt, but doesn't deserve you. Aww. Zoe says, sorry, Ezra, Dad's got to go talk about crazy people online to a bunch of crazy people online if you want to eat tonight. Listen, honestly, if there were enough patrons, I'd be happy to do that. Honestly, I would do it multiple times a day if it was that big. Like, I really would expand the show. I wouldn't be one of those creators whose show took off and didn't provide the equivalent content. I know Michael was very good at providing that extra content to patrons. He had like so many patron shows, like specific member only shows going on. I would, but we're not quite there yet. I think we will be eventually, somewhere down the line. But right now we're not there. My goal right now is to, now that I have some of this equipment, is to now start ramping out those YouTube videos I've been saying I want to get to. But honestly, I did a few. I know I did one, the Dave Rubin one, and I tested it out. The webcam I was using was fine for live stream, but as for like produced videos, I wasn't a fan of how it looked, and it didn't give off what I wanted to do. So I think we got something here now, though. Oh, the content was good. Go watch that Dave Rubin video. But production value-wise, I wanted to step it up. My daughter's name, by the way, is Enid. It's Ezra and Enid. I see people, I don't know if they're speculating, but throwing out other names. All right, let's do this, and then that's the show. This is a short one. Another story I talked about in the Majority Report, but let's do this. So, yesterday online, the pro-Trump circles, bubbles, whatever you want to call it, online, discovered that if you went to Antifa.com, you would be redirected to Joe Biden's campaign website at joebiden.com. And this was scandalous to them. You should have, I urge you to open up Twitter, open up Facebook, go to the search, type Antifa.com Joe Biden. The things that will come up will literally, you'll just be like, what? How? What? Are you serious? What? People, are you serious? I mean, let me actually see. I think I saved one. Here we go. Graham Allen, a conservative and Turning Point USA contributor, almost 150,000 followers on Twitter. Here is his video on this. He's obsessed with this. He thinks this is gonna take Biden down, it seems like.
I don't want you to think it's just me. All right, Jake, do it. Do it.
Antifa.com.
Joe Biden for President.com. Are you kidding me? Wow. Ladies and gentlemen, what the crap is going on? Donald Trump, President Donald Trump, Don Jr., the White House, share this video right now. The world needs to see that there is some funny stuff going on. And they're going to say, oh, it was just an accident and a coincidence. Shut up. No. Antifa.com goes to Joe Biden for president. Share it with everybody now. I don't want you to think it's just me. All right, Jake, do it. Do it.
Antifa.
Wait, is this repeating now? Yeah, it's repeating now. It's repeating now. Okay. Oh, my. Oh, my. So let's explain. So this went so far that at a press conference yesterday, an OANN reporter, OANN is that far-right cable news network that literally their owner spends all day tweeting at Trump to watch them instead of Fox News. They're like begging for him to choose them over Fox News. A reporter with them, I use the word reporter loosely, was at Trump's press conference and asked him the question about an odd occurrence when you go to Antifa.com and going to Joe Biden and ask for his thoughts. I mean, that's really what they spent time on at this press conference, asking the President of the United States. So let's break this down. I mean, this is obvious to people who know just a little bit about tech, but for people who don't, maybe they don't know what's going on here. And I'll tell you why it's important to break this down, because there are people on the, I don't want to say on the left, but liberals who don't understand what's going on here. And the update is they have their own, really, conspiracy about what's happening. So, Antifa.com is basically redirecting to Joe Biden's website. What that means is whoever is the registrant, the person paying the yearly renewal and has ownership and access over Antifa.com for as long as they pay for that yearly renewal for that domain, simply redirected the name. I mean, there's nothing more to it. I mean, I'm just repeating how I'm describing it, but that's really it. They went into their domain name administration panel. They click the box or input joebiden.com in a little input where you say where you want your domain to redirect to, and they applied the changes. That's it. Press the button. That's it. You don't need permission from the website you are forwarding to. You don't need any of that. I can really register any domain. I could take if I had ownership over BarackObama.com, I could forward BarackObama.com to DonaldTrump.com without Donald Trump's permission. Just that's plain and simple as that. Now, we don't know who owns Antifa.com because they have obscured their personal details. Every domain name has accessible, it's called Whois information, online. All the registrars, the companies that you go to register your domains, provide Whois. And you basically can go to these sites for each of these, and they're also Whois specific websites. You go to any of these sites, input a domain name you want, and pull up the details of the person who owns the domain name. If you want to reach out to them for a partnership, if you want to reach out to them to inquire about buying the domain name from them, that's what it's there for, or to make sure, really what it's there for the most part, is to make sure that no one can infringe upon your trademark or name by registering something and you not being able to do have any legal recourse. That's one of the reasons too. But there's also a service that all these domain name registrars provide where you can hide these details. Now, they can still contact you via the information that the Whois privacy puts instead. The Whois privacy service puts instead in the Whois information, but they just can't see who they're contacting unless you decide to reply to them. And this specific service that they're using is called WhoisGuard, and this company is based in Panama. They're owned by a U.S.-based domain name registrar called Namecheap, pretty big in the domain name industry if you're familiar. So basically, these privacy services put their own company details with basically a throwaway email address specifically for your domain name. So for Antifa.com, they can make something like Antifa.com@whoisguard.com. That way, you don't know the actual registrant's email. You know the actual registrant's name. But if you need to reach out, you can do it through that forwarding address. So we don't know who owns Antifa.com. It's not connected to Panama. It's just the company who the owner has paid to provide the service to put their details instead. They have no other connection to the domain name. As for the history of the domain name, it was a website back in the late 90s, early 2000s. At some point, it dropped, which means whoever owned, and when I say it was a website, I mean it was an actual like anti-fascist movement website. At some point, the owner didn't renew the domain name. It dropped, and then it was registered in 2002, and has remained registered ever since. Now, it could have not been renewed by the person who registered in 2002, but not fully dropped, which means it's just been, there's a new owner, or there could be multiple new owners, we don't know. Because there's something called a drop catching service, which basically means, no, that's something different, excuse me, we didn't get there yet. Because basically, after a domain name expires, it goes on the auctioning block. And if you win a domain name in an auction, the registrar that has it just basically renews it for you and sends it to your account. It doesn't actually fully drop. Now, if it did drop, what would happen is a drop catching service might try to go after the domain name if they see worth to it, so that they can pick it up and then try to resell it themselves. That's something different. So we don't know how many owners it's had over the years, but it's never been dropped since 2002. It's had a for sale landing page on it. So if you go to Antifa.com between 2002 and around earlier this year, I think it's something like February or March earlier this year, you would be redirected to a sales page for it. Then, at some point in late May, shortly after George Floyd was murdered, just as the Black Lives Matter protests in the wake of his killing were starting to take off, suddenly there was a Antifa-related webpage connected to Antifa.com. This webpage was basically standing in solidarity with Black Lives Matter and the George Floyd protests. But it also said, if you would like to join the Antifa movement, we'll be providing information on how to become a member. Now, if you look at tweets at the time, there are more legitimate Antifa Twitter accounts that were warning about this page because of some giveaways there. Sounded like it could have possibly been a hatchet job. It's a hatchet job, but could have been something set up by the right wing to try to dox people or get people's information, because no self-respecting anyone related to Antifa would say any of that, because everyone knows that there is no Antifa membership because there's no Antifa organization. Antifa is basically a leaderless movement where anyone could claim Antifa. Anyone can be an anti-fascist. Now, there are Antifa groups in local cities, But those are specific groups. For example, the insert city here name Antifa, anti-fascist, group. That's something different. It's not Antifa. There is no broad-based Antifa party to join. Now, we covered all that on MR earlier, but here's the update. And I wrote about this on Mashable. Go to the site. I tweeted about it earlier. You could see the update as well if you want to read about it. Here is the update. Now, there was a Yahoo News report that also covered the hubbub about Antifa.com forwarding to Joe Biden's website, which actually no longer forwards there. We don't know why, again. It stopped forwarding there, nor do we know why it forwarded there to begin with. And in Yahoo News' coverage of it, they found a connection to Russia, which in turn became fodder, red meat, for the liberals trying to make sense of why Antifa.com would forward to Joe Biden. So you have the conservatives saying it's because Joe Biden and the Democrats must be in cahoots with Antifa, and here's the proof. And then on the other side of the equation, you have liberals saying, no, the Antifa.com domain forwarded to Joe Biden to smear him, and Russia's behind it. Neither are true. The Yahoo News report is wrong. I can't believe they kept, I don't know if it's still up. Last I checked it was. Can't believe there was no correction or takedown because it is just straight up misinformation, bad reporting. Prop or not, a anonymous website that exposes, quote unquote, Russia propaganda, which has numerous problems with it and is really should not be taken legitimately, but has been covered by legitimate news sources, also ran with it and really promoted this, and it got thousands of retweets and shares and likes. So that's why it really took off. But I looked into this. There is no actual Russia connection. What Yahoo News found was that before WhoisGuard was used as the Whois privacy service, which is based in Panama, which puts the Whois in Panama, there was a company that also provided Whois privacy services called Domain Protect. And they are based in Russia. So just like WhoisGuard, which is based in Panama, when their service is used, the Whois information shows up as Panama. If you use Domain Protect, a Whois privacy service located in Russia, the Whois privacy for the domain using that service shows up as Russia. That's it. That's the connection. It has nothing to do with the owner or the registrant. It has nothing to do with the content on the domain, nothing to do with the content that the domain forwards to. From the looks of it, Domain Protect is run by a ICANN accredited domain registrar called DomReg, and they are also based in Russia. And it seems like their primary service is to, like I mentioned before, be a drop catcher, which means they pick up expired domains as soon as they expire in order to resell them. And I can't fully confirm this, but from the looks of it, they might be who picked up the domain name back in 2002. And if not back in 2002, they certainly picked up the domain possibly when it expired but didn't fully drop in the years after, because they've been connected to this domain for a while. So if I had to guess, here's what happened. Someone bought Antifa.com. Who? I don't know. No connection to Russia that we know of, because there's no proof. There could be, but we have no proof right now that there is. No connection to Panama. Could be. No proof there is. No connection to Trump or anyone pro-Trump or the Trump campaign or anyone who wants to help Trump. No proof. Could be, but we don't know yet. No connection to Biden or the Democrats. Possibly could be. I doubt it, but possibly could be. No proof yet. Could be a troll group. Could be a rich person trying to have a little fun. Could be someone trying to add value to the domain name to resell for more money. Because now it has been talked about. It has tons of backlinks now from the different pieces written about it, which ups its SEO value, which makes it a more valuable domain name. That could be one thing. Could be someone who wants to start a fake news website for purely monetary gain, which I've covered a lot and seems to actually be the driving force behind a lot of these fake news websites. The idea that they can make a lot of money because people eat this shit up. The point is, we just don't know. There's no proof of anything other than the fact that the redirect to JoeBiden.com means nothing, that the who is information is completely obscured, so we don't know who actually owns the domain name, and the who is privacy services, whether it be the Panama-based company or the Russia-based company, also mean nothing to who owns the domain name. Everything else is pure speculation. And stop spreading misinformation, folks. Because, I'm not a both sides person. I don't believe in both sidesism. Just because the right does something horrible doesn't mean you have to find something on the left or even left-leaning that is the equivalent, because oftentimes there is no equivalency. But when it comes to misinformation, disinfo, and fake news, that's one area where it's truly a bipartisan issue. There's some super chats, and then that's it. Then we're wrapping up. Samantha says it's Doom, the real Antifa HQ. Invisible Ninja with another super chat. Letter hack is great. I'm People's Comic _ though. Oh, right. I'm sorry. There were two artists who I am into the show today. Right. Where was the other super chat? There was one more, and then that's it. How could I not find it so I could wrap this up? Come on. Sofociano, thank you for another super chat. For those criticizing, at least man is trying to make a difference for all by speaking truth to power. We want the best for all, not just the few rich. I don't think anyone here was criticizing, were they? These are all fans and supporters in here, it looks like. So he says to join Antifa, please forward us $1,000 and we'll forward you back double that through Soros bucks. I mean, that's definitely, there is a grifter play, I'm sure, somewhere. Maybe not Antifa.com, but there's certainly been ones that do. Dank says, LOL, to join Antifa, please send me 1 Bitcoin and I will double it and verify your membership. Right. Grim says, Antifa are largely DSA, IWW, SRA, and PSL. There's overlap for sure. There's also anarchists. So a breaking tech company based in Russia. Dank says buying the Antifa site is a long-term investment. Last I saw, actually, the last price it was at, doesn't mean it sold for this price, but the last publicly listed price I saw was like $37,000. I mean, not the most expensive domain name in the world, but certainly out of reach of anyone who probably is on the streets for Antifa. Steven says, do you pronounce it Binder or Binder? It's Binder. Binder. I like to say, like Bin Laden. Binder. Oh, boy. Oh, boy. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that is the show for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. Really, it's been a lot of fun these past few weeks. The audience is growing. The audience is really growing. Even, thanks to Majority Report, co-hosting, and just, really, you guys pushing the show and letting people know about it. I can't thank you all enough. And I think it's only going to get bigger here. You know, a few months to the election. This is prime time political season. So hopefully there's more to, yeah. Why is Hector going? No. Oh, our great country is going to burst in flames in November. Yeah, we're really... Our great country is going to burst into flames in November, says Hector. All right. Well, guys, I'm going to play some Plants vs. Zombies Battle for Neighborville on the Xbox. So, until next time, see you all next time. I like that. On Doomed.